All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. What I wanted to talk about today is being present when you are not present. Being present when you are not present. In Zen, there's this idea of being present, that you should just be fully in the moment and in the here and now. And when we're doing our Zazen, when our mind starts to wander, what do? What are you supposed to do when you're in this room and your mind starts to wander? What would you do? Would you engage in a really long fantasy, or would you...
Bring it back.
Hey, there we go. Bring it back. Come back to the breath, come back to the moment, come back to your current environment, right? So, a challenge that we experience as humans is that we tend to think a lot about the past and the future. And a lot of people come to Zen because they want to be more present. So the good news is, if you sit a lot of Zazen, you will find yourself being more present. You will find that the stories that you tell yourself become less vivid and less solid. What does that allow? That allows for you to have things happen such as, oh, maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. As opposed to if we're not practicing some kind of spiritual practice, we tend to get in these stories. That MFer knew exactly what they were doing and they did it on purpose and I'm gonna get them, right? Which is not, generally speaking, the road to happiness. As a matter of fact, the very first lines in the Dhammapada, which are the teachings of the Buddha, are, look how he beat me, how he threw me down and robbed me. Live this way and live in pain. Look how he beat me, how he threw me down and robbed me. Abandon these thoughts and live in happiness. So if we're constantly dwelling on all of the terrible things that all the terrible people have done to us, it tends to make us unhappy. Having said that, I count 5 therapists in the room, and the whole point, including myself, and the whole point of therapy is to help people to identify all the things that have happened to them and make sense of them. But optimally, then we can let go of them, because we've all met people who are, ever since they started doing therapy, they have all of these limitations all of a sudden and all of these things they can't do anymore. Because they realize in therapy that those things are bad. And there's merit to that. Perhaps you keep getting in abusive relationships and then you realize you were abused by some caretaker as a child, and in therapy you realize, well, I keep repeating this pattern and I want to interrupt it. That's a good thing. But if you get to the place where you feel you have to stay in your room with the curtains drawn and 3 locks on the door all the time so that you will be safe, that is going to very much limit your ability to enjoy your life. When you're really triggered, you might need to do that for an hour. But if you're doing that all day long, every day, you're probably going to be quite isolated. Does that make sense? That's where therapy can hurt as much as it helps, because if you get too attached to the things you learn in therapy, you become not very happy, right? So we want to know what happened, and we want to know how it affects us. But if we get too attached to it, we've just created a new prison. Same as when we were unconscious before. Does that make sense to everyone? One of the things that I find very helpful about Zazen as a trauma survivor myself is that it's an opportunity to both dive into and pull out of all of those things. So if I'm feeling really triggered and really over my skis and I sit and I really feel it fully, and I'm not numbing with Netflix and I'm not avoiding by going to the gym, and I'm really feeling it, and I have the tears and I have the sobs and I let it out, then I feel better after. It's like a storm coming and then you're peaceful afterward, right? At the same time though, over a lifetime of this practice, I have found that my narratives start to weaken. So maybe someone wasn't great to you and you sit with it a lot and you get to the place where you're like, well, that wasn't great. And I'm not discounting that that was painful for me. And I'm tired of carrying it around and I just wish them well and move on. So we're always looking for that balance where we're not denying how we feel or we're not denying our past, but we're also not amplifying it. And my experience, just talking about for me, is that when I don't do Zazen for a few days, what starts to happen is my unpleasant negative thoughts become much louder. And when I sit, it's like if you imagine it, you take a bunch of really pure spring water and you put it in a jar, and then you put some dirt in there and you shake it up. Our mind is like the pure spring water. Our mind is inherently enlightened, good, awake, clear. Sitting is like letting the jar sit on the shelf. What happens when you just let it sit? All the dirt settles to the bottom and you can see clearly again. The dirt is still there, you can see clearly. But then when we get up off the cushion and we're going and interacting with people all day, it's like shaking up the jar. Start getting aggravated. Especially when you have this kind of stuff happen. Did you hear what so-and-so said about you? Right? That will get him all agitated, right? Or when I say, doesn't it bother you when he does that? Now you're thinking about that and now we're colluding and getting ourselves all stirred up. So sitting is very helpful for letting us settle. Again, I'm not saying that you should not acknowledge your pain points. Actually, the opposite. It's very important to acknowledge and feel those pain points. What I'm suggesting is to not, when you are in a jail, you get the key, you let yourself out of the jail with your insight, you start behaving differently, you start choosing healthier situations for yourself, but then you get so attached to those things that you just put yourself right back in jail and locked it again. It's just a different jail. That's what we want to avoid. We want to not imprison ourselves. So this comes back to my original point, which is we're sitting in here for 2 days trying to be present. And again, that does happen. You naturally start to not be so caught up in your narratives. You start being more present with people, with yourself, with whatever situation you're in. That is a natural offshoot of our practice. But I get a lot of people coming to talk to me in Dokusan or meditation instruction. I just can't be present. I'm thinking about this job interview I have. I'm thinking about this terrible thing that just happened. My father is having surgery right now. I have not been what I would call extremely present this morning because I'm thinking about him and wondering if he's okay. He lives in Boston and we're in Arizona, so far, far away. Yet, you can clearly see that I'm here. This is not Star Wars Episode 8 where everyone thinks that Luke is there, but he's not actually there. I'm here. But it's being present with not being present. If I am present with the fact that I am not present, am I not quite present? Right. So what we want to do is not create any gaps. We don't want to be sitting there going, my dad, oh, I'm doing a terrible job being present. I suck at meditation. I should just give up. I think I can't be here today when my dad's having surgery. I need to go home and watch Netflix. Now, again, don't get too attached to my words, because if you got so overwhelmed that you truly couldn't be here, that would be okay to leave and go watch Netflix. But the challenge I would give to everyone is to be present with your not being present, because ergo you are being present. Have I seemed present to you today?
Yeah.
But until 20 minutes ago, you didn't know my dad was having surgery, right?
Right.
I appear to be present because I am present with the whole catastrophe. My dad's having surgery. On the other coast, my aunt is in the hospital having just had surgery. But I'm here. Both things can be true. It's not either or. You can be present and absent at the same time. I used to have a friend who was much older than I was, and when I was a young whippersnapper, I enjoyed spending time with him because he was very wise. And I remember one day I went over to his house and I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I don't really feel like I'm here." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I flew from the East Coast the other day or yesterday, and I feel like it takes me a day or two to fully arrive when I've flown that fast." He said, "Humans aren't really meant to travel at jet speed. I can't make the switch that fast. So it's like half of me is still there and half of me is here." And I said, "Well, you seem like you're here, right? We can be here and not be here at the same time." But the teaching is, if you are not fully present, to be aware of it. Without the practice, we would typically, at least my default setting would be, to be extremely distracted, not know we're extremely distracted, and have some kind of mishap. The mishap might be a fender bender in your car. It might be forgetting something important at work. It might be, you guys can ask Maureen about this. A very typical one for me when I'm not being on top of myself is to snap at her for no reason. Not only does she not know why, but I don't even know why. And then I've taken it as a cue to kind of go, what's going on with me? And it's usually I'm stressed about something, but I'm not paying attention to it. Does that make sense? So if I'm fully present with it, we talked about it last night and we talked about it this morning that my dad's having surgery and that I'm stressed about it. So far we haven't had any bunchy interactions. But if I was kind of doing my impression of an ostrich and putting my head in the sand and, "Surgery, what surgery? Why do you keep bothering me about this surgery?" And it's a classic married people thing of like, "Why do you care about me so much? What business is it of yours?" Which when you have trauma is kind of a default setting. It's like, get out of my business. Those of us with trauma, we just learn how to deal with life without any help. Nobody's going to help anyway, so why would I want to expose myself to you? You're just going to make it worse. I gave this very advice to a married friend of mine last night who's going through something, not important what it is, and he was saying, "I just need to take a deep breath and try to let it go and be nice to my wife tonight," which that's a noble intention. But I said, "Can I challenge you on that a little?" And he said, "Okay." And I said, "What if you told your wife what's bothering you and leaned on her and had emotional intimacy?" And he was like, "Oh, that. This guy's a therapist, by the way." I'll let the non-therapists in the room in on a secret. We're just as crazy as you all. Nobody becomes a therapist because things went well. We just have a little more experience in keeping our shit together than you guys do. But I mean, listen, I'm not dogging therapy. I really believe in therapy. I've spent a lot of my life in therapy and facilitating therapy for people, but we're just as prone to falling asleep as anyone else, and so are Zen teachers, by the way. Probably the person in my life that I've squabbled with the most in the last 3 months is Mushin, my Dharma successor and fellow Zen teacher. We really got into it a couple months ago. You want to get a good laugh, get two Zen teachers to trigger each other and see what happens. You'd think we'd just be like, "It's all good, baby." Because no one becomes a Zen teacher because things went well either. So when our trauma points get triggered, we just fight just like anybody else. My teacher likes to say the point of this practice is to become friends with yourself. So imagine your close friend's dad was having surgery today and he was worried about it, or she was worried about it. What would be your attitude toward that person? Not a rhetorical question. What would be your attitude? Compassion. Right. How might you manifest that compassion? Yeah. Your friend's parent is having surgery, you feel compassion, how would that show up?
Like, how do I show up for them? Or just,
Yeah.
Just checking in on them.
Right, you would check in on them. Hey, any news? How's he doing? How are you feeling? How's your day going? Here if you need me, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of agrees with that, right? Like, we're all decent people in this room, caring people. If your friend's going through something, you'd be kind to them. But think about yourself. Are you as kind to yourself as you are to your friend? Or do we tell ourselves these stories like, well, I have a responsibility to run this session, and I need to show up and do it right. And I left my brown zafu at home. How could I do that? What kind of Roshi am I? Can't even remember my cushion. And I'm supposed to teach these people. God, I suck. Right? Does that sound familiar to anybody? We're so much harder on ourselves than we are on our friends, generally. And part of the point of this practice is to develop compassion, but it's not just compassion for others. You know, we have this chant, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them, but you are part of the numberless sentient beings. You are also a sentient being. And as a matter of fact, the teaching in Buddhism, I won't go off on a large digression here, but we have the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana schools. And Zen is a Mahayana practice, but Mahayana does not reject Hinayana, it absorbs it. And Hinayana is all about focusing on yourself. So Hinayana practice is about only focusing on your own liberation and enlightenment. Mahayana, the focus is on serving others and helping others. But it starts with you. Sort of like that thing we've all heard on the airplane, put on your oxygen mask before you help others. Because if you run out of oxygen, you can't help the other person, right? I'm sure that they say that for a reason. I'm sure there's been people who have had problems trying to help others with their oxygen when they didn't have their oxygen on, right? So my task today is to be nice to myself until I hear back from my dad or one of my sisters that he's okay. And if he's not okay, then I have to do a hard pivot and go, sorry, bro, I gotta go. And then I'm booking down to Phoenix to get on an airplane. But I learned a long time ago that I can't do that every single time something's going on back home. And I'm fortunate to have many family members nearby him that can help him. But I will feel very relieved when I get a call that he's okay. Until then, I need to be extra nice to myself. But it's hard to do that. We get into this, I'm not being present, I'm not being present, I'm not being present. Why don't you just embrace that you're not being present and go, of course you're not being present, sweetheart. You're going through fill in the blank. Wouldn't you do that for your friend? I guarantee you that every single person in this room has something on their mind that is bothering them. Someone that you love is not well, someone that you love is upset with you, you feel that you don't have someone to love, you're trying to deal with school, you're trying to get through Red Mountain, you're wondering why you took this job, you're getting ready to move, whatever the case may be. I would implore you to consider, next time you're sitting on your cushion and I'm not talking at you, to consider, how would I behave toward a dear friend who is going through this? Moving sucks. Even if you're excited about the move, it's very difficult. Logistically, it's overwhelming. It's fatiguing. It's emotional. Wouldn't you be very kind to your best friend who was going through a big move? Of course you would. So I hope that the person in question, I'm not singling anyone out, whom I care about a great deal, is being nice to himself as he's going through this moving process. Give yourself a break. Again, my teacher says the point of this practice is to become friends with yourself. You are a worthy and good person. You wouldn't be sitting in this Zen-no if that weren't true. People that are not worthy and good people don't bother coming to hear a Dharma talk to try to find some guidance to improve their mindfulness practice. This is a self-selecting group. If you're watching this or hearing this, you are trying to make yourself better and make the world a better place. So if you're a good person, why don't you deserve your own love? That is a rhetorical question. Of course you deserve your own love. So whatever that thing is that's bothering you, it is transient, it will pass, but while it's happening, it's intense and it's difficult. And if we ignore that, and if we're not kind to ourselves, we end up making bad decisions. We end up not getting enough rest. We end up doing things that are bad for us. We end up around people that are bad for us, whatever. So for me, on the one hand, I've always been taught, and I do believe, that this practice has no goal. If you sit down on the cushion with some goal, you'll probably just get frustrated. But at the same time, this practice does have a lot of really nice benefits. It just happens on its own. You just naturally start to like yourself better and be nicer to yourself. And when things are difficult, you don't make them worse. And you might even make them a little better by being nice to yourself. And you learn how to be present even when you're not present. Any questions or comments? So my teacher that I mentioned, who says one of his practices is become friends with yourself, is named Dainin Roshi. He's the teacher that made me a teacher. But for many years prior to Dainin Roshi, I studied with a teacher named Shishin Roshi in Boulder. Shishin, I heard give, 500 Dharma talks maybe? And at the end of every Dharma talk, he would ask what I just asked: are there any questions or comments? And when there was no response, he would say, that either means you understood all of it or none of it. So hopefully it's the first one. All right, thank you all very much for being here. Be nice to yourselves.